Today we're going to be reacting to Mr. Dee. Today we're going to be watching Mr. Dee. It's a show about a underqualified high school teacher who's kind of faking his way through life and faking his way through being a teacher as well. I think this is a great show. I've never actually watched it before, but the idea sounds really interesting because I know as a new teacher, a lot of people feel like they have imposter syndrome, where they don't really feel like a teacher yet because they've only been doing it for a year or two. I myself have only been teaching for 2 years, and I can really relate to this character. It's pretty interesting how even as a qualified teacher, even as someone who's gone through school and gone through years of practicums and hundreds of hours in the classroom already, that you could still feel like you're really not a teacher, and you feel like, what am I doing? How am I supposed to do this? I'm really not sure where to go from here. Well, it's pretty funny, it's pretty interesting, and I can't wait to watch this episode. So let's just get right into it.
Alright, I'm Mr. Duncan. Actually, the Uncan is unnecessary. Call me Mr. D.
So already it's pretty interesting because that's how I feel a lot of the times at school. When I taught in the UK, we had to be very formal, we had to be very kind of strict with our students, we had to go by our last name, so mine would be Mr. Lobach. But now teaching in China, they don't even call us by our last names, they just call us by our first name. So my kids will yell out, Eric, Eric, instead of Mr. Lobach, which is a big change, but I much prefer it compared to being called Mr. Lobach. It feels a little bit too formal, it feels a little bit weird to me, even though I went through Canadian elementary school, Canadian high school, Canadian university, where there was no chance that you would be allowed to call your teacher by your first name. And even in the UK, when my students found out my first name, they freaked out and it was hilarious. Let's get back into the episode.
It's going to be confusing, man, for Mr. Dwyer. Anyway, you're older kids. I understand that. We're really close in age. Not much older, really, so I can relate to a lot of the things. I'm here to help you with any problems, concerns, okay? Anorexia, all right? Maybe some drug problems there. A little low self-esteem, the lip ring, maybe a gender issue. You are a woman. You are a woman. A very handsome, beautiful, not handsome, beautiful woman. Solve that problem. I see these things.
So again, pretty interesting. As a teacher, as someone who's only 24, I do feel sometimes close to my students in age. Even though I do teach elementary school, when I talk to high school students, I'm like, you're really not that much younger than I am. So it is interesting that he's trying to relate to his students that way. Obviously, he's not doing it in the best way. You never want to just go out and say like, oh, here's your problem to the entire class. You would never do that. That's completely inappropriate. But obviously this is comedy, it's not realistic, so let's get back into it.
I see these things because I care. Everybody here is from a different background. I like that. I've been to many countries, almost all of them, except for a couple hundred. All right, let's pick a country. Let's see if I've been there. Japan. Been there. Konnichiwa. It's middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Have not been there. Death. Sharks. Do not want to be there. Okay. How long are these classes? 80 minutes. Okay. 74 minutes to go.
I'm awesome. No, you're not, dude. Don't lie. I'm awesome. Driving around in my mom's ride. I'm awesome. Quarter of my life gone by. I'm awesome.
Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm new here.
Oh, I'm Gerry. I'm not really new because I've been substituting for a few years, so it's just harder than this regular.
So it's interesting that he would bring that up. So Mr. D has gone from being a substitute teacher to seemingly a full-time teacher, from what I can understand. And he said that substitute teaching was harder, and in some ways it really is. If you're a substitute teacher who's watching this video, I understand your struggle, because it is friggin' hard to be a substitute teacher. you come into a classroom that is not yours, you have to deal with someone else's schedule, and it's different for you usually every single day, unless you manage to get in with a school and they kind of bring you in as their preferred substitute teacher. You're really kind of stuck going to lots of different schools in maybe even lots of different areas, so you could be driving 10 minutes one day, 40 minutes another, and 2 hours the next. You never really know. So it's kind of true that being a substitute teacher is harder than being a regular teacher in some ways, but in some ways that's untrue. But let's continue on with the episode.
Welcome all the new staff. Question, go ahead. No, I was waving. This year, let's kick St. Pat's right in the sack.
Yeah, I am on it. Right in the sack, sir. You got it.
All right, everybody.
So again, I don't know how it works in the States. I'm sure schools are very competitive. When I was in elementary school and high school, I was on a few sports teams, and it wasn't like this, but I don't know what went on in the teacher's lounge during that time. But I will say, during my time in the UK, they were really into their sports, and every time we had a gathering of the teachers during either lunch or after school, there would always be some sort of special announcement. You know, the varsity gym boys basketball team won their championship or whatever. You know, every time there would be some sort of new accolade that the school would bring in, and they were pretty competitive about it too. I know for a fact that the schools that they were competing against, there were some rivalries going on, so it's kind of interesting to see the same thing. It wasn't so much so in Canada, but I guess our sports programs aren't as developed.
Those are some interesting stretches.
Just a warm up, really.
Well, they should probably run first, but it's your class, so...
Yeah, well, they're training for a half marathon, so I'm limiting the running right now.
Half marathon, I finished my marathons, but that's just me. Anyway, if you want some help from a fellow phys eder...
You never want to be this teacher, just telling you right now. Never go on your first day and start pissing everyone off, because that is a surefire way to, I don't know, be the one who everyone hates. My first year in the UK, I tried to keep as quiet as possible, unless I was obviously asked a question. And unless it was something that I was super passionate about, I didn't really butt into anyone's business, because, you know, everyone has their own way of doing things. You may disagree with how someone else is doing something, but unless there's some sort of catastrophic result on the rise, there's really no reason to butt into someone else's class, especially like this.
Yeah, just because you can do that doesn't mean you can
Watch.
coach.
Anyway. Check. What's up, homies of Xavier Academy? Mr. D in the house.
This is an emergency.
Emergency announcement.
I absolutely hate cringy situations like this. This hurts my soul to hear. You know, an older gentleman will say, trying to act cool and hip. Just be yourself. There's no reason to try to change your vernacular, try to, you know, stick it with the homeboys, as they would say.
Pay attention. Bring it in, please. If you are not as tall as the first Mr. D, then you... Okay, exactly. No. You, unfortunately, I'm sorry. I gotta cut you. You are not even close to that size, okay? Alright, why don't you go down the hall and audition? Come on back up here, glasses. I'm gonna show you a pick. This is what we're gonna use to free up space once we know who our best player is. Okay? Run by me. Go ahead, run by me.
I feel like this is not how you would start off coaching for a team that you haven't even set up yet. I feel like you should start maybe with a warm-up, some simple single-person drills, and then continue on, and then after a few weeks you can start learning how to do picks and all that jazz. But I feel like, again, I don't think this is how you coach basketball. I'm not good at basketball, but this doesn't seem right.
Recruit a 12-year-old girl? What do I just go to some online chat room? Is that what you do?
Or you could just go to her school and introduce yourself and call her parents.
Nice. Another cooler?
Yes, sir.
Again, I understood the joke of the, you know, online classroom chatting, but I feel like going to another school and introducing yourself and then talking to the parents is you know, here's the online classrooms, chat rooms, and then here's the where his head's at. I feel like it's not that far off from being extremely creepy.
This is Anne Marie Elementary, huh? I heard a teacher here get stabbed in the leg by a kindergarten kid.
There she is.
Again, never do this. This is a quick way to get fired and go to jail.
Candace Williams. Best under 13 player in the city. See her? I'm going.
Yeah.
Give me a boost. Give me a boost.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Heard you've been lurking around Anne Marie Elementary School. Talking to some grade 6 girls? Yeah, I was actually trying to recruit a Candace Williams basketball.
Yeah, again, this is exactly how it would happen, except I'm sure in a second he's going to say, you know, oh, good job for trying to recruit this person. Instead, it would be, you're fired, and I've called the cops. They're here to pick you up at this very moment.
That's Candace Williams basketball. Awesome. Okay.
That happens more often than you think. As a teacher, you know how to spell. In fact, you know how to spell most of the words that you're teaching to your students, except that you are questioning yourself every 5 seconds. I know for a fact that I've looked at a word and been like, oh God, what do I do? How do I spell this? Even though I know how to do it, I have it in my head, I'm 100% sure, but for some reason, there's a little bit of doubt in my mind. It just happens as a teacher, you get nervous, it's okay. Yes, your kids might find it funny that you misspell a word or that you're unsure, but it's not the end of the world.
Potato fry, salt and pepper. That's mine. Do not steal that. That is my little shake that I do.
I thought that the kids would like the fact that I'm prepared and really wanting to help them learn. I had a seating chart and a lesson plan. They hated me.
You're too by the book. You're too.
So yeah, just because you're prepared and ready does not mean that your class is going to necessarily like you, especially at first. You have to show them that they can trust you, essentially, because you're a new teacher, they've never had you before probably, they're coming into a new school possibly if they're coming in from elementary school to a high school or a middle school to a high school, so you have to be prepared to kind of do some some trust building exercises with your students, because just because you're prepared doesn't mean what you've prepared is necessarily fun or interesting to your students, and especially if you're in a classroom that your students may find initially boring or dry because of the topic. You know, it's your job to also make it interesting and fun for them, and again, it's really important to make sure that your first impression is your best impression.
I had the most amazing night tonight with the parents. I gave them my yearly plan and they loved the famous quotations I put up on the wall.
I got famous quotes too.
Blame yourself. We're all really alone. Wow.
Yeah, when you're a teacher, parent-teacher night could either go great for you, it could go okay, it can go kind of bad. You never know, especially with some parents, you just kind of get inundated with questions and you may not have all the answers, especially if you're a new teacher, and that's okay. Obviously, as someone who's so prepared, she's able to do really well with the parents, but maybe not so well with the kids. And then on the other side, you have Mr. D who, he's not prepared at all, so he's not doing too well with the kids, but then the parents are like, what are you doing? You have nothing to offer our children. Why would we ever put them in your class or send them to your school for that matter?
Good job to get the princess to the castle. All right, classes, let's see if you can get by me. Get by me, get by the dragon. Nope, okay. She's dead. Don't touch it, just CPR. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, mean dragon. But this dragon's not so mean. This is a nice dragon. It's gonna lift the princess up. There you go.
I did it! Yes! Yes!
So obviously Mr. D has learned his lesson a little bit, not to go for, you know, the dream person that he wants on the basketball team, but to focus on what he has and kind of extend their talent out. So it's good that he learned that lesson.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
So that's it for Mr. D. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see me react to more episodes of Mr. D, or if you have another teacher show in mind, please leave a comment down below and let me know. And that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye bye.